Welcome, listeners, to the first episode of The Hills Have Voices. My guest today is Kim Sargent, and we're going to talk about the Queen's Gambit.
Kim Sargent. I work here at Kentucky Valley Educational Cooperative. I am the social studies instructional specialist, but most importantly, I'm a big fan of science fiction, fantasy.
Thank you, Kim, for that introduction. My name's Alex Smith. I actually just waved backwards. I'm one of the Holler engineers here at the Kentucky Valley Educational Co-op, and I'm a content creator. Now let's jump right into the Queen's Gambit. So Netflix released a miniseries, and it's called The Queen's Gambit. And it doesn't make it clear in the get-go, but as the story lets on, it lets you know that it takes place in Kentucky. And the girl, born and raised in Kentucky, The Queen's Gambit. It's a Netflix miniseries. If you haven't seen it, go and see it. Go and watch it right now. It's one of the most inspiring miniseries I've ever seen. And within 4 weeks of it being on Netflix, it was the number one. It was Netflix's number one miniseries they've ever premiered to date. And I'm glad they used the word miniseries and not TV series, because it means it's over. They're not gonna try and make a sequel. Pretty sure that means it's over and done, which is something TV struggles with today.
But what I love about the concept of miniseries, for one thing, I'm definitely a child of the 80s when the miniseries was really born and put out there for all of us to consume. Although I have to say the 70s, probably Alex Haley's Roots was really the first one that I was aware of. But anyway, the idea of the miniseries says, you've just got a limited time to enjoy this. And I think we need to have more series that do that.
For anybody that didn't know, the Queen's Gambit miniseries is actually based on a book by the same name. It was authored by Walter Tevis in 1983. My next goal is to read the book.
Yeah, from what I understand, you really need to. And I think Tevis himself, Walter Tevis, is a really interesting person himself. But I think that you see that in a lot of his works. And I mean, what I love about him is that he writes what he knows about. And I think that my husband has taken several writing courses and has even written and published a book. But what was really interesting in one of the courses is that his mentor said, write what you know. And I think that is the smartest thing an author can do, because sometimes you have some of these folks who get out there and they want to write about what they love, which may be like science fiction or fantasy or whatever, but sometimes that storyline can get thin if they don't know enough about it. But if you're writing about a place that you live in, and you're looking at every tree, you drive by every driveway, who lives in what house, there's such a robust nature, such a richness to that the story itself, becomes more fully developed. And I think that's one thing about Tevis, because he does that. 3 or 4 of his books have been turned into movies. Like you've got The Color of Money, it's all about pool. And, he grew up with some, I can't remember his first name, but the kid's last name was Kavanaugh. And that was his best friend there, in central Kentucky. So, and he runs a pool hall. So he's going to write about a pool hall. Again, writing about what you know. And then he's got The Hustle. And then where I first ever learned about Walter Tevis, back in the 80s, David Bowie was in a movie, and it was called The Man That Fell to Earth. And oh my gosh, phenomenal. I mean, David Bowie is brilliant in this, but I think one reason why he's brilliant in it is because the writing is so good. The story itself is so good.
The first half of the Queen's Gambit takes place in Kentucky, and we're going to talk about that.
But the minute it opens up, and I think it says Mount Sterling, and my husband and I and I looked at him and I went, oh my God, is this Mount Sterling, Kentucky? And he said, I think so. And then when they kept talking about Lexington, I went, and I mean, for us, being from Kentucky and seeing a movie that has us in it, or at least our place, because, for those of us in Eastern Kentucky, you don't have to have our accent in there. You don't have to have people that dress like us, look like us, or whatever it may be, even though we dress and look like everybody else. It's not that. But what we love, we are so attached to place that when you just identify place, I think that's one thing that the TV series Justified did, is that, for those of us, for me, because it's based in Harlan County, ideally, that when people would connect with that, just because you're mentioning those places, I think we automatically connected.
Yeah, I did see where Tevis was actually born in California, and I thought it was like, and he's writing about Kentucky, so I'm like, maybe that says to the fact that, Kentucky is a special place that even if you're not born here, it can still feel like home.
Oh, yeah. Well, his family, was actually very much a Kentucky family, I think in many respects, because his family, and I'm not sure the year, so I'm not going to say that one out loud, but his family received an early land grant around Madison County. So that would be Richmond. So his family was, was already connected here physically, but he ended up developing heart complications because of that. So when he lives in the convalescence home, and then here's the other part I thought was interesting. He was on phenobarbital for like a year, which is a downer. It's a barbiturate. And, interestingly enough, you have your main character in the Queen's Gambit that becomes addicted to those. Maybe that's discussion for a little bit later in this, but anyway, and then finally he joins his family like a year later here in Kentucky, but he becomes very attached, to the people and to his community.
Kim asked me, why did I like the Queen's Gambit? And I may have gave a longer than intended answer.
There was a scene, I think, in like the third episode, which I was already hooked. I don't know. There's something about the way it's filmed.
Yeah.
There's something about the fact that it's in Kentucky, because you can give me any show that's in Kentucky and I'm going to watch it, because immediately, they could, like you said, they could just say the name and I'm in it.
You're
like
there.
Justified, just like Justified. I was like, you said Harlan County.
Yeah.
I'm in it.
There.
It is just filmed in this like incredible way. And there's one shot in season 3. They got the cowboy character. I don't know what his name is, but he's in it, and they're going to face head to head, and it's when she faces him. I can't remember if she loses or wins, but there's a sequence there where they keeps just like doing all these separate shots, like 6 shots on the screen at a time, and it's got them two.
Yes.
Like she's on one side, he's on the other, and it's like they're staring each other down, and it's just like something like. It was such a fun way of filmmaking. You could tell when they created this, they had a lot of fun. There's one, and this was my favorite shot of the entire show. When she first goes in that Kentucky chess room, when she's in that tournament.
Oh, in the high school, in the gym. Yes.
Yeah, and it zooms out, and as it zooms out, you see the banners that say Kentucky State Championship, and you just see a room full of men. That's all you see. You see this one woman who's coming in, and you just see this room full of men. And I don't know, to that's empowering, because that I mean, at that point in the show, she's going to go in there and she's going to destroy every one of her opponents. And
let me give you a different perspective on that one too. As a woman, that when she walked in that room, that was the first thing that she saw. We always talk about that glass ceiling, especially when it comes to women's advancement in politics or the workplace or whatever it may be. But as a woman, and especially at that time, I want to say, was it the late 60s, early 70s, whatever, that's represented in that time period. So now we're talking about the full setting. Mm-hmm. So you realize when she walks in there to do that, I love how the twins that are registering people are just dismissing her, for one thing. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, but you've never played in a tournament. She goes, yeah, but I'm going to play in this one. And, and she was just automatically, like I said, dismissed. And she gets in there and proves herself. And the more she does that, the more they're like, wait a minute, and you can tell that they're having a hard time understanding that this is a woman that's doing that. But I can tell you right now, when she walks in that room, she is looking at not only a figurative ceiling, but a physical ceiling, because she knows, this is the blocks, and I love it that she gets that look on her face, because she sees every person in this room just like another brick in the wall, and she's going to knock them out until she makes that big hole, and she just pushes right on through. Mm-hmm. So as a woman, when you're watching that, instantaneously, I connected. I was like, you go right now, So, and I think that's something to think about too. I think that Tevis really, speaks to something here. And it's like she's just this singular creature going through the world, removing her enemies one by one.
She gets Borgov.
Yeah.
In the Queen's Gambit, Borgov is the Russian Grandmaster and world champion. So he's kind of the main antagonist.
Yeah.
And at the same time, she gets to play chess with one of the guys who wrote one of the books she read growing up. And I was like, the world building in this story and in the miniseries is fun. And you feel like you're there, and that's what I love. Nothing in the miniseries is wasted.
Yeah, that's why I can't say enough about Tevis. He's great at that. I think if you have a really good, solid author, world building is what they do, because you have to do that, because you have to transport. If you want that person to come into your world, to live there for a while, to stay with you, to get to know the characters, and to and again to read your work, you've got to develop that really rich, robust world, and he does that. But what I love about, just like you said, you go in there, it's like every person is real. and this is something I thought was brilliant when I finished watching this, was that Tevis was also a high school teacher. People don't realize that he taught high school and he taught university, but you can tell because he knew those young kids well. He knew how, I mean, each of them, like when you think of the great chess champion that she faces off with, she works really hard all day long to get to him, and then she gets to him and she annihilates him. That guy, I mean, that character was fully developed. You knew him. You knew that kid because he's the kid that comes into class. He's the kid that doesn't really talk to anybody. He's the kid that looks down at his book all the time, yada, that whole kind of thing. And then you had, the twins that were registering. Well, they're a little bit more social, because they hang out and talk to each other all day long. So they want to talk to, I mean, you knew these kids. I mean, as a high school teacher, there were so many people in this movie I recognized immediately, just changed their names and it's somebody I know.
For the next section, Kim speaks about the representation in the Queen's Gambit.
That he did such a remarkable job of kind of representing the times pretty accurately. Like, for instance, because now you become sensitive to that. And I started looking around at these places, like, again, as I spoke earlier, being a woman, and when she walked into that room full of men, like, I don't think that I would have had the guts to do what she did that day. I know I wouldn't have, but she did. But then you also realize too, like, I started looking around and I started looking, well, are there other groups, who else is not here? You didn't see African Americans, unless it was on the national scene, like a little bit later and that kind of thing. Like, in order for the movie to start really showing a wider array of characters, but most importantly to start showing more equity and representation, they had to move out of the States practically. They had to go international to show that there are lots of people that engage in this. But I did find myself looking for more faces, and that kind of thing, to see if they were there. But just the fact that it was so heavily male dominated for me, I think spoke volumes about the time period. And for those people now who, are our chess champions and that kind of thing, the great strides that they're making to be there. What did you think of the use of the custodian? I'm just curious, what did you think about that he ends up being the guide into the new world for her?
I love throughout the whole show, she tries to give him recognition too, but no one will write about it until the Lexington Herald. I mean, until one of the reporters in Russia. But to use the janitor, I mean, because normally you see a janitor and they're
invisible.
Yeah, you see a janitor, you're like, just your average Joe.
And that's not right either. Yeah.
I mean, no, it's definitely not the right standpoint to take on anybody either, because we're all equals and we're all equally smart. I mean, I could be a cashier at our local grocery store, but it doesn't mean I'm not smart. To let the janitor be the one that like shows her this new world, and to show her that chess is this intellectual sport and that it can be fun, it can be learned and mastered. Or champion, even I think it's grand champion. There's a word that maybe it's master.
I think she becomes a grandmaster at the very end, and again, I hate doing these spoilers, but I've got to tell you, the scene where she finds, and I think it's interesting too that she finds him. It has almost an Alice in Wonderland quality when she goes down those steps and she finds him. So you already feel, there's a little nod here, to Alice in Wonderland when she goes down there and she meets him, and then he's and she's like, what are you doing? And I think that from that moment on, she's never the same as a character.
We're going to talk about the pills that Beth Harmon takes in the miniseries right now.
They take those barbiturates, those pills. The adoption center gives those, and in the beginning it led me to believe those were what gave her kind of her abilities in chess, and maybe in a way they might have. I'll have to read the book, maybe even watch the miniseries again. But until she finally quits it because of that one guy's help, she gets better. Like she's able to like kind of guess what her opponent's going to do and does all that. And at the main end, she even dumps it. So I feel like that was the miniseries saying she never goes back. That's her kicking her addiction.
And I think that's one thing. I think especially looking at the world we live in now, that addiction is very commonplace. So I think that there is a component to this that, but I think another thing too, people may or may not know about Tevis is that he did struggle with alcohol. he finally kicks the habit. But and I can't remember how many years before he passed away that he did. I don't think it was very long before. I think the fact that he's actually writing about addiction, and also I think it's very interesting again that he brings in the whole barbiturate thing. It's almost like you feel like, again, this is an Alice in Wonderland quality. The whole idea of, drink this one to be big, drink this one to be small, drink me, that whole kind of thing in Alice. And I think for, initially, for her when she, starts getting these, but when you think about how Tevis really kind of deals with, like you said, with this aspect of addiction, I think that tells you right there that he's got some inside knowledge with that. And I think
you said, right, what you know.
Yeah. And I think that when you think about how she does kick that habit, and she, and it's almost like the ruby red slippers. I mean, how many times can I allude to other things? But, when you think of the Wizard of Oz, at the end, she says, you've had the power all along. You've always had the ruby red slippers. Just click them together 3 times and you can go home. When at the end, when, like you said, when Beth dumps all of that and she looks up and she can see the pieces, then she realizes that the power has been in her all along. And I think that's why that last game is so powerful.
Kim is about to tell us why she liked the Queen's Gambit so much.
As it tells a story of just regular everyday Kentucky. I think that, it opens up, very much in Eastern Kentucky. I think that there is a component to this. And I've talked to a couple of people who are not from here from originally that have watched it. And they're like, is that, and I'm like, it's rural Kentucky. I think that to get over this whole idea that you've got Eastern Kentucky and then you have Kentucky. No. And that's why I love Tevis, is because you have rural Kentucky, which is what we are. And then you have urban Kentucky. And I love how he really goes in between those worlds. And then eventually they just kind of meld. I think that, so I would invite people, even though that becomes, Kentucky itself becomes less of a character the longer it goes on, but I love it. It all goes, like she never, and I think this is so true, I think she never forgets her roots. And that is the thing about her as a character that I love. Just like you said, she goes back to the janitor. She says, please acknowledge him. He's the one that made all of this happen. It is a guy from the Herald Leader, which again, I was just got so excited the first time he said, he said his name, and he said from the Herald Leader. And I went, oh my gosh, I read that every day of my life for the first, 30 years of my life. I love it. So, I want to just say to people, welcome to Kentucky, watch this, consume it, know that who she is so much of who we are all across the state. But no, I think it's just a great movie. And if, and I want to say girl power, because she consumes the world and it's awesome. And final note on that, I think that is something else too, that I think Tevis did a good job with. And that is, he shows the people in her wake, but I think in the, because she not only breaks a glass ceiling, she breaks a lot of hearts all along the way, because, her heart is broken. She's not whole. And it's like chess fills in those blanks for her. It becomes that thing where she can find her importance, she can find her ability, she can find her talent. And those are all things that even if you don't, if you come into the world with a deficit and you have to find that thing that fills you in a positive way. And I don't think she ever stops really doing that. And I think that's the beauty of the end when she's walking through that, here goes another spoiler, when she's walking through that sea of elderly men that sit outside and play chess in sub-zero weather in Russia, apparently. But anyway, she's walking through them and they stop because she is who they admire. And she sits down to play with this one man. And and it's kind of like she says, this is my world and I love it. And I have found me in this world. So I think that's something else that I really love about the movie.
No, I agree. And that is so fun. I never even thought about the sub-zero temperatures in Moscow or Russia and those elderly men playing, because that is kind of hilarious.
I just got to tell you, thank you for including me in this. I'm thrilled, to be your first guest in this inaugural thing, to kind of try this thing out. Thank you so much, Alex. I loved this movie, and I'm like you, now I'm going to read the book, and maybe we can get our own chess club going, man.
Let's learn some chess.
Awesome.
Thank you so much, Kim, for this.
Thank you.
And,
thank you.
For anybody listening, that's it for today's episode. And me and Kim, we may be hollering at you later once we read the book.
That's it for the first episode of The Hills Have Voices. If you like today's episode and you have a suggestion for what you'd like me to talk about with a guest on another episode, please email me at alex@theholler.org, That's it for this first episode. Thank you all for listening, and I'll holler at you later.